tattoos?
I got a lot of these done on drugs in Berlin.
That's fantastic. The best things are done on drugs.
These ones, there's a story. These ones were done in someone's apartment on Berlin after a 3-day bender, and I didn't realise that after he'd done them, I went in the toilet and he was doing G.
Oh my god!
And I was just like, bro, you've just tattooed my hands and you're off your head on G. I didn't even know about it.
What are they?
My dad actually has these ones, so I got the same ones as my dad, and then I've got I'm fine, because that's what I always used to say when I was depressed.
I'm fine.
I'm fine when I wasn't. And then I've got some aliens and space, because I quite like that. And then this is my favorite. I got this one of my first ones. This is my favourite hip hop band, which is probably going to haunt me when I'm 60.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And then the third eye. And then I've got some on my legs as well. But
wow. Maybe we have to talk about them.
yeah, kind of. No one's ever actually asked me that. So
really?
yeah.
That's cool. It's a cool story. Amazing. Well, thanks for joining me today.
What a great intro.
Welcome to Provocateurs.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's been a long while, many reorganisations.
Yeah. But we made it.
But we're here, yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I'm so interested about how we connected, how we know each other, and just the crossovers in our worlds, right? But for the audience who don't know you, like, who are you?
Oh, okay. Where do we start?
Yeah.
So right now I am a health and lifestyle coach running a company called Willer's Fitness, which is aimed towards individuals, especially high performing men who are looking to break the cycle from, recreational drink and drug use, to help them to achieve new levels that they don't quite think is possible at the moment. We do that through health and fitness. But this is just the pinnacle of my story, because well before that I spent time as a professional DJ, spent time in the military, and to go way back, I had an interesting upbringing, that's for sure. So
yeah. Well, let's start there. What was your upbringing like? You got a bit of an accent as well.
I have, yes. I'm from. I was actually born in Colchester because my dad was in the military, but I only lived there till I was 3, and then we moved up to Macclesfield, which is near Manchester.
Yeah.
So I have a slight twang.
Yeah.
If there's Northerners around me, it gets stronger.
It's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, my friend's Australian, and whenever I speak to her when she's been back in Australia, I'm like, who are you?
You're putting that on.
Yeah, I'm like, come on.
Yeah. So, but I grew up in Macclesfield. It was, it was a hard upbringing. My mum and my dad split very young. My mum was only 18 when she had me, and there was 4 of us in the end. My dad left, and we were on very low income. Sharing a room, my brother, sort of thing. Everyone sharing, and life was difficult. My mum had a problem with alcohol herself. She was going through her own struggles, and at the time, as a 14-year-old boy, I didn't really understand that, and I was very badly behaved from like 2 years old. I was not very good at listening or being told what to do, and I sort of rebelled all my way through primary school into high school, and then around 14 I started drinking, and I had instantly a bad reaction to alcohol, from the start of me drinking, and that gradually got worse and worse to the point that it was affecting my home life. My mum was already under a lot of stress. She was going through her own problems, and bringing up 4 boys in a low income family, in the north of England is not easy anyway.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I dropped out of school, and my mum was sort of forced to make me leave the house, basically, because she had 3 other boys to think of as well. It wasn't just me. So I moved into a hostel when I was 15, and I didn't go to school. I was going to it's like a work placement, they'd call it. Usually what you do is 3 days at the work placement, 2 days at school, but I didn't do the school part. And then eventually I got kicked out of the hostel through drink-related incidences, and I was homeless. And then sort of spent some time. I had this very difficult time, which I don't know if I just suppress it a little bit now. You know, it's I have certain images of certain things happening, but I don't really remember all of it. Anyway, after sleeping rough for a few months, my granddad ended up giving me the opportunity to move to Wolverhampton with him. And I remember it was like my 16th birthday, he'd come pick me up, and I was sleeping under this underpass with all my stuff in a bag. And that was sort of like a new opportunity for me then. But I think it's important now for me to look back and think what I was putting my mum through as well, and the rest of my brothers. Because at the time I was just blaming my mum. I was blaming everyone else, but I didn't really understand what I was putting her through at the time. Me and my mum and my whole family are really close now. Anyway, so I went to Wolverhampton, and I was 16 in a city for the first time. And that was scary because I was from Macclesfield, where I thought I was a bit of a boy. And then I go to Wolverhampton, which is quite a rough city as well. And that was definitely a culture shock for me. And I sort of spent 2 years just not really understanding what to do. You know, I didn't know who I was, what I wanted to be, trying to find new friends at the same time. And my nan and granddad as well, bless them. They were really old. So, they sort of taken me on, this nightmare child in their 80s.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so thankful for them. They've both passed now, but my granddad he was like my father figure at the time. But it wasn't as easy as me just instantly changing. I still put them both through a lot of drama as well. Not as much as my mum, but still a considerable amount for their age. And eventually I was trying a few things, and I found fitness. I went to, it was a Thai boxing class actually. And I can't remember how it come about, but I ended up attending one. I absolutely loved it. And I spent, a lot of time then focusing on the fitness element. And then that's when I realized, okay, this is something that I actually enjoy. This is something that gives me a little bit of purpose. I could see a future in the fitness space. So I qualified as a PT, and then I spent, I think maybe 2 years working as a personal trainer. A lot of my alcohol use at this point had sort of, had gone down because I had that purpose. And I absolutely loved it. And then when I was 20, I joined the military. Now, people always laugh at that because when I was a kid, I think even my mum said when I joined the military, she bumped into like a couple of my old primary school teachers, and they couldn't believe it because I hated anyone telling me what to do. Wow. I hated discipline. I hated, the thought of having to stand to attention and listen to someone tell me that I'm in the wrong. But for some reason, I think it's because my dad was in the military, and I remember when I was like 2 or 3 playing with like his army fatigue, all his gear, that just somehow resonated with me. So I joined the RAF regiment, which is like the infantry for the RAF. I was thinking either paras or just normal regular army. And then someone told me about the RAF regiment, and I thought, you know what, that sounds good. So I joined. I spent 4 years there.
Wow.
And for some reason, like even with basic training, I really didn't know what to expect, but I thrived in that situation, which again was just, it always seems so strange that I went from that transition of just no structure at all, no discipline, to going into basic training and being one of the top recruits there. I just absolutely loved it. And I did Afghanistan. So in 2010, I went to Afghanistan. And then when I got back, I sort of realized that that's all I wanted to do, 4 years, serve my country and go back into the fitness industry, but this time with the military experience behind me. And this is at a time where there was no online training. It was all on the floor PT stuff. So I left the RF regiment and I went back into the fitness industry then. And I loved it. It was great. I come out of the military. I always said that I wasn't institutionalized into, the military figure. But when I got out, I realized how much I had developed as a man, how much I had grown as an individual, especially with my ability to do hard things and to just be disciplined. I really, it was just so obvious when I come out into that civilian zone, because I was much more proactive than all the other PTs that I was working with. It was a great job. But still, in the background, alcohol had just played a couple of parts. Even in the military, there was one or two incidents that happened where, it was still clearly an issue for me. And I ended up, so I was personal training. I'd moved from the military to Southend because my brother was living there. Me and my brother had grown really close once he hit 18. He's like the one below me, so he's 18 months younger. And he was living in Southend, so I moved there with him, and this is where I got this personal training job. But when I was there, one of my clients at the time said that Southend Airport was expanding the runway, and they were looking for aviation firefighters. So I thought, oh, that sounds like a bit of me, being a firefighter. And Sarah, this was at a time where everyone, when Facebook first come out, and you'd put everything on there.
Hi, Mum.
Yeah.
Put it next to your friends. It got confusing, didn't it? That's your wall, babe.
Yeah.
There's a private message.
Yeah. So I applied for the job, and I got the job as an aviation firefighter. So I left this job at Virgin Active as a PT, which was one of the best jobs I've ever had. I loved it. The guys there were great. There was a lot of money in the club, so there was a lot of clients as well, which was great. But then I took this job as an aviation firefighter. Straight away, Facebook changed my status to firefighter, and I went up to Aberdeen. I did the training for 3 months, and it must have cost the company like maybe 30k to put me through it. And there was me and 9 other lads, and there was another guy called Dave, and he was an ex-military guy as well. And once you've been in the military, I don't know if anyone is listening back to this who's in the military or has been in the military will know that you always have a strange bond with anyone who's been in the infantry, who's been in the military. So me and Dave had this, this military bond. And the last day, qualified as an aviation firefighter, we went out into the town in Aberdeen and we got absolutely wrecked. And I woke up in the morning, the hotel room was a disaster. It was absolutely wrecked. Couldn't remember what happened. And the officer come up to me, he's like, Sean, you're in a lot of trouble. And I was like, what's happened? He's like, we had complaints from all the noise. And he said, as soon as you get back, you got to go and sit in front of the board. And I was like, oh, bloody hell. And I went there and there was, 6 people in front of me, and they said, we're sacking you for gross misconduct, because they just put, like, Stobart had taken over the airport. They said, because you put the company in disrepute. They're just opening up this new airport with this expansion, and we've already had complaints from a member of staff. So that was I always remember this. I got the bus back and I rang my mum. I was like, what have I done? Because I just left, a fantastic job and then gone for this other job, which I thought was going to be my new career. And alcohol had got in the way there for this new career. And I think I was about 24 now. And, this has gone through quite a quick transition from leaving the military. But I really felt at this point lost again.
Yeah. And did that moment like wake you up at all, or shift anything, or?
You would have thought so. You would have thought so, but not really. I think it was there's always been a lot of moments throughout my life, especially throughout my 20s, where you would have thought, looking back now, I thought, why didn't I just nip it in the bud then and do the work needed to leave, alcohol behind? But I didn't. And I sort of felt lost, and it was that feeling that I felt when I was 15 again. I thought, what am I going to do? I've put myself in, you know, in an awful situation. And so I went back into the fitness industry, but my heart wasn't in it now. I wasn't interested in the career. And I started going out quite a lot more at the weekends, and then drinking, and at this point starting to use drugs as well, starting to use cocaine. And that sort of started to get a little bit out of hand. You know, it started every other weekend to every weekend to ordering it in before we've even gone out, sort of thing. And then we started going to parties with house music. I think this is how we have some connection there. I'm pretty sure it is through my early days in London. And anyway, we started going to parties and then after parties. And I remember a friend, Ross, he had a set of CDJs at his house and everyone was on him. And I was like, oh, can I have a go? And I had a go and I was like, oh, this is all right. Me and Liam were having a go all night. And I was like, do you know what? I could get into this. I really like this. And I wasn't really into house music. I was always into hip hop as a kid. Things like Wu-Tang and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I'd just been emerged into house music and I absolutely loved it. So I think it was like the week after I ended up getting a set of like really cheap turntables on my credit card. And I set them up in the living room on an ironing board. And then that was it. Every single weekend after that, it would be finish work on a Friday, back home, drinks, get into gear, decks were on, load of people come over, and we just stay up all weekend playing on them.
So you were doing fitness during the day,
yeah,
and then partying,
yeah,
DJing.
And my boss obviously at this point was like, you know, what's going on, because my fitness is getting less and less. I was still training, I was still into it, but the actual career itself I'd lost interest for. And I found this new passion for music, but I didn't think that it would ever go anywhere. And then what I started doing is then I started recording a couple of mixes. And then when I was at work, as a fitness professional, I would just spend most of the day messaging people on Facebook again. Anyone who had like looked like they were in the music industry, you know, if they had a set of headphones on their profile picture, I'd message him this mix. and then this one guy randomly, Lewis, he got back to me and he said, look, we've got a DJ competition in Vauxhall this Wednesday. You know, do you want to come? And I was like, oh my days, couldn't believe it. You know, I think we'd played maybe like one or two bars at this point, you know, for friends, but nothing serious. So I told Liam, he was like, absolutely. So we went to Vauxhall from Southend on a Wednesday. A load of our friends come. We did this DJ competition, and it was amazing. It was so good. We did really good set. And then Lewis messaged us the next day. He's like, look, I've got you a set at Egg on Friday. This Friday, can you do it? And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my days, we've got a set at Egg. And it was selling tickets. So you'd sell tickets for 15, you'd keep a £5. And obviously they just wanted it to fill the room out. But we were lucky because that first set, like 50 other friends come, like a load of people jumped on. We all went down to Egg on the Friday, and the promoter couldn't believe it because we just sold all these tickets. And and the set went well. We had a great night. And then I think this was in November, maybe 2012. Now we're up to. Wow, it's quite a long time ago, isn't it now?
Yeah.
I was like, wow. Anyway, and then he asked us to come back on New Year's Eve. And then at this point, we really were in shock. I was like, wow, we're going to get to play Egg, one of the best clubs in London, on New Year's Eve. It was only in like room 3. But at the time...
Claim it, it's Egg.
Yeah, this is it. So, well, I did. I couldn't believe it. And again, so we went, same people come up, sold all the tickets that he give us. But this time what happened was 2 of the other DJs after us didn't turn up. So me and Liam ended up playing 3 hours. And I think because of our background in music, in terms of like I've always been a little bit, what's the word? Just off, not what everyone else is listening to, sort of, one of them sort of kids, and that come through in the music that we were playing as DJs. We were always searching for stuff that wasn't maybe in the top of the charts on Beatport. Anyway, so one of the actual main promoters for Egg, who works for the actual company, he watched us play, and Liam started talking to him. His name's Hans, and he's like, "Look, I really like what you guys did. We'd like you to come back and play for the club." And then, and that was it. At that point, we were just at London every single weekend. And after a few months, it sort of happened at the same time where my boss was like, "Look, you've got to make your mind up. You either go and be a DJ, or you come and work here, because you're coming in on a Monday, just in an awful state," because we were staying up from Friday through to Sunday. And then at the same time, Hans said to me, he said to me and Liam, "Look, if you want to make this work, you've got to move to London." So that was it. Done. Like, put in a notice at the job, so did Liam, and then we ended up moving, like, within a matter of weeks. And we had we moved to Brick Lane, just off Brick Lane. Nice. Yeah. In like, it was like a house share, you know. Just like, it was rough as, but at the time I couldn't even care less, you know. Yeah. We were just like, let's go. And we did it. We moved to London, and we ended up getting a residency at Egg. So we started playing on the Fridays. Then we were helping to run the rooms. Then they started to put us in on the Saturdays. And I don't know if you remember Egg at this time, but this is when it was, you know, it was going off.
Oh yeah, it'd be like what, the breakfast sessions, isn't it? Yeah. I remember the flyer. There was like that fried egg.
Yeah, breakfast at Egg.
Was it called breakfast at Egg?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, until like midday and then some.
Yeah, it was. But they had some massive artists. You know, Keener Music were playing there, and it was a really good time for Egg, and it was a great time for us as well. It was like that sort of deep house era. So we started getting a bit of a name now in London, but at the same time, Sarah, I've gone from disciplined military fitness to now being submersed into a world of chaos. You know, really, the music industry there's no rules or regulations. You do whatever you want. And the thing is, at Egg, we were getting all our drinks for free every single weekend. So it was Friday, Saturday. Then we was after partying, and then what happened is we got brought into Egg in the office. So we'd started working in the office a couple of days a week. Excuse me. And then we started doing like pre-parties, like midweek, to sort of promote Egg. So you can see where this is going. We're doing maybe a Wednesday and a Thursday, drinking, getting on it, Friday, Saturday through to Sunday. And that sort of started to progress, and it started to become a bit of an issue. You know, I'd be propped up at the bar, the last person there, or I wouldn't be turning to Egg at work, or me and Liam would be having some sort of drama. We got picked up from a few international gigs, and one of the biggest ones we had at the start was in Romania, and I ended up getting kicked off the decks there because I was so, you know, off my head. But the problem was, I think, is because you're in the music industry, it's not, no one.
Where's the regulation?
Yeah, you know, it's sort of, it's not accepted, but it is.
It is in comparison to other industries.
Yeah, like any other industry.
It's like completely accepted.
Yeah.
I think over the years, I don't know if you've found this from your experience, and I know you're somewhat out of it now, but over the years there is more challenge or more awareness around the maybe negative impacts of drug use and having too much alcohol. And I think a lot of people in the industry are talking a lot more about mental health and lifestyle, and the impact of doing that year after year or day after day on DJs or on anyone in the industry. Absolutely. Really. But I think back then, like 2012, we were not talking about that at all.
No one was. Absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree there. I think there is a lot more people talking about it now.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is that no one really wants to call anyone out on it. And that was, again, it's the responsibility on the individual. Yeah. And to be honest, I think if you told me that I had a problem back then, I wouldn't have listened anyway, because I was so involved in this new career.
And problems, wouldn't you say, they're so... there's a sliding scale. So if you've got people around you who are doing more or seem worse, you can kind of rationalise your own self.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not as bad as them.
Yeah.
Or like, I can't. It's
Yeah.
And you can always find someone who's got a more extreme version.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's it. And I think also because, especially when you start playing at different places all the time, you only see these people for one day. They only see you for one day, and everyone's there to party. So that instigates you to party as well. And then once you leave, no one cares, because that's the end of it there. But what happened anyways, we started to make some really good contacts at Egg. We started to run the radio. Everyone knew us at Egg. We were known for the DJs at Egg. We were like the most listed DJs to ever play that club in such a short space of time as well. And for me and Liam, it was almost surreal, because we'd never set out to be DJs.
Started on your ironing
table. Exactly. But literally a couple of years before that, and now we're spending time and getting to have conversations with some of the biggest DJs in the world, or your managers or agents. And even Lawrence, who owns Egg, he ran Trade. It was one of the biggest gay parties in the world. They were renowned for, I think they got famous for turning down Madonna at the door. It's like iconic in the music. It's giving me goosebumps now. Iconic in the music industry. And me and Liam are now a part of that. And what happened is then we did a party, and we started getting into the Berlin sound quite a lot. And we were giving a party at Egg, and we brought over a couple of DJs from Berlin, Symphy and Diego Kraus. Symphy's massive now, but at the time they were like the in thing, especially in Berlin. And they come over, the party was great, they after partied with us, and then Symphy was like, look, I want you to come and play over in Berlin. And I had just been to Berlin, I think, like once before that, but it blew my mind. Have you ever been?
Do you know what? It's one place I haven't. I've heard so much about the scene there, good and bad. Yeah. I know so many people who have been, but it's a place. I think maybe the house techno. Like, I was into it, but not super into it. Yeah. And it's very music led, isn't it?
It is very music led. Yeah, absolutely. So we got the opportunity to go and play, and the party was incredible. And then what happened was that Symphy said the same thing that Hans said to us with the London move. She was like, look, if you want to make this happen in Berlin, you can. We can get you on the Watergate agency, which is like one of the best clubs over there. So that was it. I'd sort of ran my time at Egg anyway. I think they were sort of had enough of us. We weren't really there to offer any more. And I was taking the piss quite a lot as well with my attitude. Bearing in mind, my ego at this point was sky high, and that energy, I think a lot of people got that as well, especially in the club of Egg. So we moved over to Berlin, same thing, within a couple of weeks. Packed our stuff. We ended up finding an apartment for like 3 months. We were like, yeah, let's just do it. We got onto the Watergate agency, set up a label with Symphy. She gave us access to this incredible studio. And we started to play like some of the best clubs over there, Tresor, Club Divisionaire, getting guest list at Berghain. Like, these are like iconic venues again. And it was, the first year was incredible. We were really a part of a scene that had been around for so long and known in that scene as well, in that space. But this is where, for me, my drug and alcohol use got really bad. It was already quite a bad, anyone looking in London, it was too much at that point, but Berlin sort of tips it over the edge, because everyone in Berlin is a creative. No one's on that 9 to 5 clock. The parties are all the time. Everyone's always about and networking and partying as well, and drinking and taking drugs. And moving into that when I already had a problem just made it a lot worse. And then it started to affect my relationships now in the music industry. So we fell out with Symphy, kicked off the Watergate agency, went on to another agency. Same patterns were happening all the time. Me and Liam were growing a little bit distant from each other because it was putting a lot of pressure on us. And I think being in Berlin as well, and not coming from money or having any money as well, we were always relying on the gigs, but a lot of that then was getting spent on the actual party itself. And then feeling that pressure in the studio to have to make music to keep our career going was really difficult. And then what happened is that I started to use drugs in the studio a lot. And then that, for me, become a huge trigger. So I couldn't go into the studio without using drugs. But then the problem is with that is that that's where I needed to be to make the music to keep my career going. And it was just such a vicious cycle. And I think for the first year, like I said, it was unbelievable. It was like the dream. But then the next year and a year after that, I started slowly deteriorating, really losing quite a lot of respect in the industry, falling out of a lot of people. Gigs were not where we wanted them to be. Taking jobs for the sake of it, just because we needed the money, rather than is this something that's going to benefit us in our career.
Were you aware when this was all happening that the dots were connecting to your patterns and behaviour? Mm-hmm. Did you know that and you just didn't care?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did know that. I was aware, but I almost felt trapped. I started to try certain things like, AA, CA, therapy, things like this, but I don't think I was committed enough.
Deep down, you didn't really want to stop.
Not really, no. I think as well, sir, I didn't see a way out at the time, because I wanted to continue this career that I'd spent so much time and invested at this point, maybe 6 years of my life, 7 years into my life I didn't see any alternative. And the problem is with that is because it was a cycle. It was going to the gigs, facilitating my drug use, having a day off, feeling sorry for myself, maybe going to one AA, feeling okay again, going in the studio, getting on it again, and that was just the complete cycle. But what happened was the lockdowns, and that for me was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it sort of forced my hand to change, because we lost, obviously everything shut down, so we didn't have any gigs, and I didn't have any money because I hadn't put any aside, and my mum and my dad weren't in a position for us to just go and move back with them, sort of thing. So when the lockdowns happened, we were in Berlin, that automatically broke the cycle for me, and I had to get a job. And the only jobs they had because I didn't learn any German, the only jobs they had for non-speaking, non-German speaking individuals was at Amazon. So I had to do Amazon. So it was like the night shift. It was like, I think it was like 11 at night till 7 in the morning. But I had literally no other options. It was either that or, or starve, basically. And what had happened as well, just before lockdowns, I couldn't hold a place to live because I kept on getting kicked out of all my apartments. And then if I went into a house share, the same thing would happen. So I was like sleeping either in the studio or on my brother's sofa. And anyway, so I thought, you know what, something's got to change. I'll take the job. But it was great because first I was working the nights. So even on my day off, I was so tired that I didn't want to go out and party. And then what also happened is that I started moving my body again. At this time I was really out of shape. I had a lot of weight around my belly and my hips, had really bad acid reflux. I mean, if you'd looked at me, you could tell that I was getting to that sort of rock bottom moment. I didn't look healthy. And I started to move my body again, and a little bit of weight started to, I lost a little bit of weight, and I was like, okay. And then I knew this tattoo artist, Marcio, and he was like 44, I think. He was in fantastic shape, and he partied a bit. But I remember asking him, this is at a time when I was thinking about training again. I thought maybe this is the key. So Marcio, he used to do intermittent fasting, but I'd never heard of this before. When I was a PT, it was very much, chicken and broccoli. It wasn't not
the
eating.
Kind of thing,
it wasn't. I was thinking
6 times a week, 6 times a day.
6 times a day. That's it. It definitely was not eating. So I was intrigued. I was like, intermittent fasting. I was like, are you sure that's how you look this good at that age? He's like, honestly, I'm telling you. So I thought, you know what? I'll give it a go. And there was an app. I still use the app now to this day called Fastic, Fastic. It was a free app. So he said, look, just give it a go. 16 hours. This is what he told me at first, the classic 16-8. 16 hours not eating, 8 hours eating window. I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a go. So I was at Amazon. I was moving because I was moving. You know what I was doing? I was doing the boxes. So, the boxes would come in and you have to pick them up and put them into the package. Wow, it was a graft. Bearing in mind, I've not done any exercise now for about 7 years. Maybe I think when I was in London, I used to sit on the bike for 20 minutes every now and again. So that was a shock. But I started fasting as well. And I started to really read up about it. And I found this Spotify podcast called the Stephen Cabral podcast. And he did a whole section on intermittent fasting. So I started to listen to it. And I don't know how much you know about intermittent fasting, if you've done it before.
Enough. I personally not found it that great for me.
Okay.
But I think that's my own personal journey with, I had an eating disorder.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So it's not, restriction is not the best method for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I started listening to the health benefits, but it wasn't the health benefits that I found worked for me. It was the control. That's what I really like, because I'd spent so much of my career, especially in music, out of control, no discipline, no structure. I don't remember what time I used to get up, what time I used to go to bed, what I used to do in the day when I was a DJ, and this is an 8-year span. I couldn't tell you that. People used to ask me, where do you go and eat in Berlin? Bearing in mind, I lived there for 4 years. I have no idea. So starting to fast, it gave me control again. I was like, actually, I'm in control of the decisions that I'm making here every day. And I used to set that fast and I'd really push it as hard as I could, 17 hours, 18 hours. And I'd break the fast and I'd be like, yeah, that's a small win there. And then I was moving my body. And then I remember opening up my fitness pal again. It had been like 10 years. And I started to track my food and I had like a period where things were moving in the right direction. Weight was coming down. My body was starting to change. I was feeling more in control. I hadn't completely knocked the drugs on the head at this point. Every now and again I was still using, still going out, but it was a lot less frequent and I was a lot more focused on having that routine and structure. So after this, Liam, my brother, he then started to fast as well. And he was getting the same results from it. And then we started to exercise a bit. So, I started to run a little bit. I remember that first run back was absolutely horrific. I think I did like a K. I was just like, wow. But I persisted with it. I kept going because I was at such a low point. Just to have that feeling again of just being alive without drugs, it was just so powerful. And I thought, you know what, I can do this. And also because I remember how fitness saved me when I was, 16, 17, 18, how it finally gave me that purpose and direction. And then reminding myself of what discipline brought to me when I was in the military, I started to connect them dots a little bit. And things started to move forward. And what happened then is I lost weight. I remember seeing my abs for the first time again. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And then I started to save money. So all the money I was getting from Amazon, because I wasn't spending it all on drugs this time, I was saving so we could move back to the UK. And I moved back to the UK 2021 in July. But then what happened is the lockdowns, everything finished, everything started opening up again. Sorry, I'm talking too much here. I've got... So we went on to a new agency, and there was a little bit of hype building around us again. We'd had a couple of releases that had gone quite well. And we got taken on from an agency here in the UK, and it was like David, who runs the agency, is someone that I'd looked up to for years. There were some really cool artists on there. And the idea was that we moved back to England, we go onto this agency, they get us a lot of shows. We were going to work with Darius Sarossi, and we're going to do all his parties. Like, we'd been booked on for 93 Feet East with Moxie, with him. And then we got a tour of Australia planned, tour of New Zealand, 10 shows in the UK, loads of releases. But Liam, my brother, was like, look, I'm done, basically, because he had seen how much it had pulled us down. And then obviously having that break away from the industry, how we'd grown closer again. And Liam, bless him, he was going through his own journey with weight gain and depression and drug use as well. But it was sort of overshadowed because mine was so bad. No one was thinking about Liam. It was like, oh, look at Sean, he's doing so well, sort of thing now. And I think Liam knew deep down that going straight back into that environment was only going to bring the same result as it was before. So I remember we moved back to England. We moved to Southampton because I didn't want to move back to London because I knew that I was still on the fence with my drug use. And if I'd moved back to London, it would have been a disaster. So we moved to Southampton because I had like an ex-military friend there, and Liam managed to get a job there. And we went to Bournemouth for the day, and my agent rang me, and he's like, look, Sash Australia's confirmed. We're going to fly New Zealand, 4 shows over there, 4 in Australia. And I was buzzing. I was like, yes, it's back on. Like, I'm going to, DJing is back in. We had like 10 shows lined up. And I remember telling Liam, Australia's in. He's like, Sean, I told you, I couldn't care less. Said, I don't care how much they're paying us, where we're going. I said, I'm out. And we had a big argument. We, if you've been to Bournemouth, it's like a massive, we like stormed off both the opposite direction. So I rang back my agent. I said, look, Liam's not going to do it. He said, well, don't worry about it. We'll just bill it as the Willis Brothers for now whilst we sort it out with these shows. Now, bearing in mind, no one's made any money from the industry for,
Yeah.
So they've done all this work. And I was like, right, okay, I'm going to do it. And even though I'd made great strides forward, I was looking a lot better. I was feeling a lot better. There was still a lot of work to be done. I wasn't free. I still had a drink and drug problem. But in my head, I thought I was just going to be able to go to the gigs and the shows, not drink or do drugs as much, do it when I choose, and everything was going to be fine. So I had the first gig in Nottingham in 2021, in July. I went there, not going to drink at all. And then I started playing. I thought, I'll have one drink. And then I had another, then a line. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up in hospital. I had a massive gash in my head here, big black eye, blood all over me. Apparently the police had brought me in and found me on the floor, and had silly amounts of cocaine in my system. So I basically nearly overdosed.
Wow.
And that had escalated within a matter of hours. And I honestly, I could not remember what had happened at all. And I remember I was being really, really aggressive with everyone, like all the staff, like anyone saying anything to me. And I went to I took a moment, went to the bathroom, I just broke down. I was like, what am I doing? Just looked an absolute mess. I thought all this hard work that I'd done. I rang my dad, and ironically, my dad and my brother were out running in the New Forest. And I called him and I was like, look, I'm in hospital. I'm like, in a bad way here. And then my dad said to me, he's like, well, you know what you've got to do? So that next day I rang, my agent, just said I was like, that's it, I'm done. And it cancelled all the shows, put a little status out on my social media, and that was it.
Wow. Was that hard?
It was do you know what? I think just because I was at that absolute rock bottom moment, it made it so much easier. I think it was more after, on that the day or the second day it was like an obvious decision. It was either that or I'm going to end up dead. But I think what happened then is just the months after sort of having this identity crisis. I've been in the industry for 10 years. I'm known as a DJ. Who am I going to be without that? What am I going to do? Who am I going to be without the drugs, without the alcohol? Am I going to be confident? How am I going to travel as much?
Did you see at that point in time, as you went through that there was any way that you could stay in the industry and not have the drugs and the alcohol?
Yeah, good question. No, at that time, no. I knew that for me as an individual, especially I think even more so that my brother wasn't, he was already out. So I didn't have that support there. I knew I couldn't do it on my own. I mean, that was like, in hindsight now, I'm glad that it happened on that first show, because if it didn't, it would have happened eventually later on down the line. But I think because I'd always had a problem, really negative reaction with alcohol since I was 14, 15. I think I knew deep down that it's never going to happen. Yeah. And also, I just don't think I enjoyed the music as much as I thought I did. I think it was just the actual partying side of things. And this is what I speak to a lot of people is, who want to break free from drink and drugs. I always ask them, if you remove drink and drugs from that situation that you're always drinking in, would you still enjoy it? And if the answer's no, then you don't really enjoy that thing. It's the actual, substance itself. And that's what I had to really sit down and think about myself, is that if I can't do gigs sober, then what's the point? Because I clearly don't enjoy it as much as I claim to.
That's a really good identifier, actually. I like that.
Yeah, it's, and it's because what I remember is that I did try and do gigs sober in the past. And they were always the worst ones. Like, I never had fun with them. So,
and it's a fine line, because I often have this conversation with people in the industry as well, where I've been in the industry for 17 years, gone through years of drinking, years of not. And now I found a place that works for me with it, in that I know I can have 2 drinks and that's all I need.
Yeah.
Right. And why do I say I want to have those 2 drinks? Because it is a social thing. If I'm networking with someone or whatever it might be, I've found I'm somewhat in their energy, or we're just on the same level. But that's what works for me. Yeah. I get that I've never had an alcohol addiction, or I would say that times with drugs, I've had years where I think substance use was too high. But I could break that cycle very quickly and not go back, and then not touch it for 10 years. So I guess it's interesting because it's knowing yourself in it. Yeah. And it's finding your balance with that and what really works for you, right? Is that kind of what you're helping people with in what you do? Absolutely.
So good way to put it there, because I think sometimes we're always looking for external validation rather than looking at us as an individual. It doesn't matter if so-and-so can do this or that. It's like, how do you react with it at the end of the day? And if like, for me, I'm sober now, not because I have a problem, because I know if I drink or take drugs, it's always going to hold me back from everything that I want to achieve in my life. And that's what I think you need to ask yourself, is that if when you're going out, or if you're having a drink, whenever it is, if it leads to something that you wake up the next day and you're regretting that situation, then you got to ask yourself, is it serving you anymore? Yeah. But like yourself, you can have a couple of drinks, no drama. My brother, he did a long period of sobriety and now can moderate it if he chooses to. You can just go out, and some people can, but it all depends on the individual. And I think that's the work that you have to do.
100%. And sometimes you only learn it through experience.
Exactly.
As well. And only learn it the hard ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So after I left the industry, I I really didn't have a clue what I was going to do. And I remember looking at jobs, and a job come up as a primary school teacher. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to ring up and see. And luckily the guy was ex-military. So we had a great conversation. He's like, look, Sean, you're not qualified, but I really like you. We can train you up. So why don't you come and teach a lesson? So I did. I went and taught a lesson, and I loved it. So I got the job as a PE teacher for primary school. Now, first thing I realised is that I actually wasn't as badly behaved as I thought I was, because kids nowadays are.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that was
different.
Do you know what the thing is, Sarah? I remember ringing my mum for, I'm going to go into this school, ex-DJ, ex-military. Yeah, these kids are going to love me. They're going to think I'm Mr. Cool. Oh, that was the complete opposite.
It's so funny. In lockdown, I always often tell the story to my friends. I say I got roped in, but I actually liked it, to teaching 1 day a week at a private school, entrepreneurship and business studies. Hospitality was shut, and it was a very unique experience. I will say that. Yeah. I'm with you there. I was like, wow.
Hats off to you.
Hats off to teachers, like serious amount of respect.
Yeah, well, they are definitely not paid enough.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So I did this job, but at the same time, what I started doing was documenting my journey through, through recovery and transformation. Mm-hmm. And what happened was a lot of DJs started to reach out to me. A lot of people in the industry that I respected started to reach out to me, because me and my brother were known for partying. We were the party guys in the industry. And I think a lot of people also knew how bad it had got for me. When they see that transition, people reaching out and saying, look, how are you doing this? So I started to give a bit of advice, and then I started to become more aware of the online coaching space, which I didn't know at the time, because I'd come from the gym floor, from all them years ago. And I started to just coach people for free. And then I had a friend called Kai, who's based in Ibiza. Yeah. And I absolutely love that guy. I knew him from Abode and from the party. He tried to book us a couple of times. We'd done a podcast for him, but nothing could really happen. But we stayed in contact, and he's like, look, I love what you're doing. I want to give it a go. Like, can you coach me for 90 days and I'll start documenting it. So I thought, all right, fine. So I did. And because he's got such, an influence on his social media, so many people were messaging me.
Wow.
Like loads of people. And then I started to read more into how online coaching works, and I built a program, and I started to sell it, for like 50 quid, 100 quid or something like that. But by August 2022, I was making more money from that than I was from the PE teacher.
Amazing.
So I'd done a year as a PE teacher, but then I had to make the decision. Obviously, you have to let them know before the actual term started in September. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. So I left that and I set up Willer's Fitness. And that, when I first started Willer's Fitness, that was working with people in the music industry. That was the idea of it. But since then, it has now grown to working not just with people in the industry, but high-performing men and women who want to make that change. And the reason why it's sort of gone from high-performing men and women, because DJs are high performers. Anyone in the music industry or in that space, as you know, is like it's full on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like
it's not for the faint-hearted.
It's not a 9 to 5.
No.
But what we found is that a lot of people who are in that high performing space, whether it's entrepreneurs or, guys in the city, in finance, working silly hours, a lot of them had the same problems and the same traits with drug and alcohol use. So we expanded it, and then it grew and grew. And then last year I managed to bring on my brother full time to work for me, which was like a beautiful thing. And I really had to twist his arm because he had a job that he was enjoying. I was like, look, come and work for me. You've had so much experience in this. And he did, and he come on, and now it's got me to where I am now. But I think that the best thing about this is not just being able to help so many people through my own experience, is that it's helped me grow so much.
Yeah.
As an individual, as a man, to see my true potential, which had been blurred for so long, and also just being able to stay away from drugs and alcohol, which has been a journey in itself over the past few years. That hasn't been easy, but to be where I am now, so far away from drugs and alcohol as well, is something really special. And not only that, it's brought like my family much closer. Now I don't drink, my mom doesn't drink. Like, we could never spend Christmases together. Now, like, over the past 3-4 years, we've done Christmases, and yeah, it's just been an incredible journey. So I'm very grateful.
What would you say has been the most marked difference for your relationships, and also just for your own sense of well-being?
Relationships, I think, is definitely the trust side of things. Reliability. When I was using drugs all the time, I was not a trustworthy individual. I was not reliable. And I think in a relationship, both of them things are very important. And I speak to a lot of men who say the same thing. There's trust issues. Well, of course there is, because you're off your head every weekend. Or you say, what alcohol does for a lot of us is we end up doing things that we said we weren't going to do. I'm only going for one, and that turns into 20, So I think that now, especially with my wife, she's been through a lot. She was with me from the Berlin days.
Wow.
I mean, God knows what she's seen in me then, but she stayed with me, bless her. She's been so supportive, but what's been, I think, the best part for me is now knowing that I am a trustworthy individual. I am reliable. I can be there when she needs it, and because she was there when I needed it.
And I suppose that must give you a stronger sense of self and
Absolutely.
trust in your own self.
Of course.
As well, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think, it just, I don't know. I think at some point I thought, is this the man I am? Am I always going to be this individual? But now I can see that it wasn't. It was just, that was what was holding me back. Obviously, you still have to do the work as well, but I embrace doing the work now. I want to do the hard work to be a better individual for everyone else around me. But that starts with me being the best version of myself as well. In terms of my wellness, I remember when I first started this journey, and it's always my mum or dad, or I ring and I say something, but I said to my mum, I'm never going to be able to get in the best. I wish I'd started years ago, because I'm never going to be able to get in the best shape of my life. And I'm 37 and I'm in the best shape of my life. And I think that has had such a powerful impact, not just the way that I look, like not the ego side of it, but I think mentally for me, because I know that I can commit. I know that I'm disciplined. I know that if I stick to something, the result will come. And also just not writing myself off as well. I'm sure you've heard it. A lot of people, when they get to a certain age, they say, oh, no, I can't do this. I can't do that. It's all in our head at the end of the day. But that's only been possible because I don't miss any days anymore. I'm not saying I'm perfect, and obviously we all wake up some days and think, oh, I can't be arsed today. But when I drink, when I use drugs, I'm not present. I miss days because through a hangover. Then I'm not 100% myself. Then I don't follow through. Then I don't put in 100% effort. I let people down, and all that. That the opposite of that has now compounded to be able to achieve things, especially physically, that I didn't think were possible a few years ago. And that's been the great thing about this journey.
That's awesome. That's so good. And what would you say if anyone's listening in who is questioning their drug use, their alcohol use, where to start, what changes they can make right now? Yeah,
great. So I think firstly, you have to be honest with yourself. I think that's a really important part of the process, is like looking and being honest. Is it serving you right now? Are drugs and alcohol serving you? Especially if you into your 30s, if you're married, you've got a business, you've got kids, like what is it actually bringing to your life? After that, it's for a lot of people, especially nowadays, I think we all want to take away responsibility. Everyone wants to go to therapy straight away. Everyone wants to say they've got a disease. A lot of people just need to do the work. For a lot of individuals, me included, I thought I had a problem with alcohol. I thought it was because of my childhood trauma or my PTSD from Afghanistan. It wasn't. It's because I had no discipline. I was the one choosing to have a drink, choosing to use cocaine. I knew where that would end up. So I had to build discipline so I could say no to them certain situations. And I think that's where people need to start building a foundation. Strong daily habits, a good solid routine, looking at what you want to achieve from it, not just focusing on, I want to give up drugs and alcohol. What do you want to get from that? because when you look at what you are going to achieve from leaving that behind, it gives you something to work towards. And then, especially how we work in Willer's Fitness, is once you've gone through that foundational period, you've set them goals, now go through a transformation. I think if you're out of shape right now, a body transformation is one of the best things that you can do for your, obviously, physically, but also mentally as well, because the discipline, I mean, you know, you're in great shape. You don't just wake up like that. You have to do the work. That discipline it takes to get in great shape, that bleeds into every other area of your life.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
You know, and I think that this is why people are always so defensive when it comes to people in great shape. Oh, well, they're born like that, or they're this, that, and the other. It's not. It's the way you look is a direct reflection of the daily habits that you have.
100%. And there's something really I find awesome around physically being able to see it.
Absolutely.
You know, like actually being able to see that that's what you've put
Absolutely.
in, and that's what it's done. And
exactly.
That's motivation then.
And that's what I found for me, is that when I started to see my body change, that drove me forward. Then I can see that the work that I'm doing is working. But also what I see is that everything else was improving, because my time management's better, my sleep's better, my energy's better. Not my ego, my confidence is better as well. And I think that when you hold yourself upright, you know, when you're confident with the way you look, that energy, like, that reflects out to other people, if that makes sense. You know, when I was at my worst, everyone had a bad attitude around me because I had a bad attitude. You know, no one wanted to work me or do things with me because that's how I was coming across. So I feel that that's a really important part of the process, is the transformation. And not only that, it forces you to do hard work as well. And that's what a lot of people avoid, is actually doing the work, you know.
And you've said discipline a lot of times, you know.
Discipline for me is I think is the key at the end of the day. It really is, because it's about doing something now that's going to, you know, better you in the future. It's not about that. Everyone wants instant gratification now. Discipline is the complete opposite of that. It's just doing things on autopilot, and that is what has changed my life. That is the difference between me now than me 3 years ago, is that I am a really disciplined individual. And I think that that's where a lot of people lack in certain areas of their life. And I think that that's important. But lastly on that, also, once you've got to that situation, you've built that foundation and you've done that transformation, I think it's about pushing the boundaries then. Because this is what's kept me going, like, year after year, is just keep pushing the boundaries, not settling. Because when I'd done that in the past, when I'd settled, it's easy to then go back into my old habits. Now I want to keep pushing the boundaries and just realizing that anything is possible. You know, it doesn't matter what your age, what your situation is. If you do the work, you can have a better quality of life. That is a guarantee.
It's amazing. And your journey is powerful, and I'm sure will be incredible for so many people to listen to.
Hope so.
Is there any way that people can connect with you or learn more about your programs, what you do? Are they in person? Are they all online? Yeah,
so a lot of the time we just direct them over to the Instagram, so at Willers Fitness, or LinkedIn, the same, at Sean Willers over there. Just drop me a message. I always reply to every single message that I have. Just ask the question, and then we can go from there.
Love it. And will we ever see you at a rave sober?
Good question. Do you know what? It's funny you said it. I have been to a couple recently. Like last year I went to a few, but they have to be day parties because I don't
Can't
stop.
do the 3 a.m s. No,
nah, not anymore. Not at all. I don't mind a day party's fine for a couple of hours, but anything past 10, I'm not making it. So.
Nice. I love it. Well, then that's a test. You love to party. Yeah. There you go. You can do it sober.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been amazing to having you on.
Thank you.
Thanks.